The Newsday continues here on One News Now. I'm Riza Diaz. Vice President Leni Robredo is calling for a more hands-on approach in the government's COVID-19 pandemic response as cases continue to rise. During her weekly radio show, Robredo criticized the administration for being in denial of the realities on the ground. Her statement came after presidential spokesperson Harry Roque claimed that anyone who needed help could easily receive medical attention.
Okay, para sa akin ka, Ellie, sana mas alam kung ano yung nangyayari on the ground para nakaka-respond ng maayos. Kasi ako naman ka, Ellie, iniisip ko baka kasi yung mga reports maganda. Hindi nare-realize na yung reality sa ground ay iba.
Robredo also pointed out that the COVID-19 pandemic response has so far been repetitive and lacking accountability.
Parati ko itong inuulit-ulit ka, Eddie. Yung first step kasi, pagtanggap ng kakulangan. Kasi kung walang pagtanggap ka, Eddie, kaya siguro nangyayari to eh. Kaya siguro ang tagal na natin, kaya siguro mabagal yung pag-action kasi nga walang pagtanggap eh.
Now, here are other stories we're keeping our eyes on. Both the branches of St. Luke's Medical Center in Quezon City and BGC are no longer taking COVID patients as it has already hit full capacity in wards and intensive care units. Some patients in critical status are even waiting in emergency rooms. As such, the hospital urges patients to go to other medical facilities. The LRT Line 2 will defer the opening of its two new stations, Marikina and Antipolo, to June 23, after reporting high number of COVID-19 cases among its personnel. The foreigners tasked to conduct the final stages of installation in LRT 2's East Extension project also could not enter the country due to travel restrictions. There are now 233 active cases among LRT Line 2's personnel. And the Labor Department is eyeing to hold virtual job fairs in time for Labor Day on May 1st as public gatherings are still banned due to COVID-19. Job seekers may apply for local and international jobs. More COVID-19 vaccines are expected to arrive in the country this quarter, but will these still be effective amid the emergency or the emergence of new variants? The World Health Organization answers that question and more in this video.
Hello and welcome to Science in 5, WHO's Conversations in Science. I'm Vismita Gupta-Smith and we are continuing our conversation about vaccines. Answering questions about vaccines today is Dr. Catherine O'Brien. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you again today.
Kate, the first question I wanted to ask you was, getting vaccinated, does that prevent infection? And what if we get COVID after getting vaccinated? Can we still infect others?
So this is a great question, Vismita. What we know about the vaccines is that they're really effective against disease. They're really effective at protecting us from getting especially severe disease and hospitalization. The second question we have, though, is do they prevent against infection? Of the early evidence that we have, it does look like these vaccines are not only protective against getting symptoms, actually developing disease, but they do seem to also prevent getting infected in your upper respiratory tract. It looks like they might, even if you do get infected, also reduce for how long you're infected. And it also looks in very early data that when you're infected in your respiratory tract, you might have less of the virus in your respiratory tract than if you're not vaccinated. And each of those things would reduce the likelihood that you would transmit that virus to someone else. So these are really interesting results that are starting to come out, but I really want to emphasize how early they are. That means that we only have 1 or 2 studies. We also don't have these results for each of the vaccines that are now out there. And as everybody knows, there are a number of vaccines that are being used around the world. So this is the reason why we keep emphasizing that as vaccines are rolling out, as we're in this early phase of the use of vaccines, people need to continue to wear masks and continue the other interventions that are keeping us safe and reducing transmission.
Kate, another question that we get often is about vaccines and variants. Once we are vaccinated, does that protect us against the variants? And also, does it mean that a new variant would impact us less? What about all the variants that are coming out, future variants? Do vaccines protect us from these variants?
From what we do know about the vaccines that are broadly used around the world is that for most of the variants, the vaccines continue to be effective. They may not be as effective as they are against the non-variants, but they nevertheless still have substantial effectiveness against disease. You asked also about other variants that are coming up. You know, we should expect that we're going to continue to see variants pop up and emerge. It's what viruses do. And the vaccine manufacturers are clearly going to and already adapting vaccines to try to make them as best they can be against a range of variants as we learn more about how those variants are interacting with the vaccines. The most important thing is this is one of the really big reasons why, even if you're vaccinated, it's important to keep you wearing a mask. We don't have the evidence for each of the vaccines, for each of the variants, nor for variants that will come up in the future about the degree to which the vaccines are protective against you getting infected. They may protect you against getting sick, but you could then go on and transmit to somebody else, and they could get sick if they're not vaccinated.
We'll be back with more stories after this break. Keep it here on One News. Watching One News Now, I'm Riza Diaz. The Health Department clarifies that the SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, is not airborne, but can stay longer in enclosed spaces. In an interview with One News Now, DOH Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeire said studies show that SARS-CoV-2 is transmitted via droplets, but these droplets may stay in the air longer in confined spaces. Thus, the Health Department's advice is to stay in well-ventilated areas. This after the Lancet published a study that claims SARS-CoV-2 is primarily airborne, which, if accepted by the scientific community, may have a huge impact on current health protocols.
The virus can only stay longer in the air if you are in an enclosed setting. That's why we warn people that if you're going out, you're going to places, make sure that the place that you go to is well ventilated, because there is really that study that viruses stay longer in the air when you are in an enclosed space.
Now, here are other stories from around the world. Canada has reported a second case of rare blood clotting in a patient who received the AstraZeneca vaccine. Canada's health ministry said the person who experienced the side effect has been treated and is currently recovering. Now, based on the evidence available, Canada still maintains that AstraZeneca's benefits outweigh the risk and will continue to recommend the use of the shot. A separate advisory council has earlier recommended the suspension of AstraZeneca use for Canadians under 55 years old. The panel is now reviewing the advice. In Venezuela, opposition leader Juan Guaido led protesters through the streets of the capital, demanding the government to procure more COVID-19 vaccines. Reuters reports that Venezuela has acquired around 800,000 jabs of both Russia's Sputnik V and China's Sinopharm, but so far, these have been administered to government officials, health workers, teachers, and some senior citizens. COVAX had offered to sell doses of AstraZeneca vaccine, but was blocked by Venezuelan government due to blood clot reports. And Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga says he is committed to move forward with the Summer Olympic Games in Tokyo. This comes after the Japanese public expressed concerns as the country faces its fourth wave of COVID-19 infections, while only about 1% of its population have been vaccinated. The Summer Olympics is scheduled to start on July 23 after getting delayed by the pandemic for a year. The fisherman crew of Gemver 1 has started to return to Recto Bank 2 years after their boat was sunk by a Chinese ship. Jenny Dongon with the rest of the story.
After 2 years, some fishermen have started to go back to the Recto Bank in the West Philippine Sea to fish. Among them are crew members of the Gemver 1 fishing vessel, which was struck by a Chinese ship in 2019. Traveling and fishing in the area took around 12 days, but they have no choice but to fish from the rich fishing ground to sustain their livelihood. When they came back to shore, they were able to catch 4 tons of fish and anecdotes about evading many Chinese fishing vessels around the Recto Bank. The fishermen admitted they feared for their safety every time they went fishing. In order to prevent any further incidents of skirmishes in the area, Gemver 1 crewmates would immediately vacate the fishing grounds once they notice Chinese vessels approaching their ship.
Natakot na rin po, kinakabahan dahil kasi andun pa po yung mga China. Yung pagbalik namin doon, lalong dumami po yung mga China doon. Mas matindi ngayon, ang dami ngayon. Parang andyan sa may, malapit na sa may Palawan ang iba eh. Ginabantay lang po namin sila kung saan sila magtakbo. Pagka alam namin palapit sa amin, nag-iwas na rin po kami. Pagka lumalapit, alis na lang kami. Kasi hindi namin kaya, malaki sila eh.
Other fishermen in San Jose Occidental, Mindoro chose to fish in waters nearest to the shore. The catch may not be as plenty compared to Recto Bank, but at least their safety is guaranteed. They say they have no choice but to avoid Chinese vessels claiming what should be their territory. For News 5, Jenny Dongon, We Are One News.
And for more updates, visit News 5, the Philippine Star, and Business World online. Visit our website, onenews.ph, for more in-depth analysis. You can also catch One News on Signal Play app. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. I'm Riza Diaz. We are One News.